My name is Joshua Ingalls,
And I'm Juan Ingalls.
and we're going to teach you guys a free marketing campaign that every single person in here can do. You don't need any money, you just need time. But if you got a little bit of time and you can go out and do what we're going to share with you, there's no limit to what you guys can do in real estate and the amount of deals you can do. You just have to be tenacious with it. So, there's three sources that we buy properties through. There's, of course, banks, there's private individuals, and then realtors on the MLS. So banks can have properties on the MLS, realtors can have properties on the MLS, banks can also have off-market properties, and so can realtors. But today we're going to be focusing on private individuals. Banks and realtors are all free sources for you guys, but we want to focus on private individuals. One thing I didn't have this in the presentation, but I definitely recommend, how many people in here are real estate agents by a show of hands? Awesome. We have a tremendous amount of real estate agents. I'm a real estate agent myself. These are people you want to get to know and network with. Realtors can be a great source of deals. A couple years ago, I think we did, 2 years ago, we got about 22 deals from a realtor. So realtors can be a great source of deals, even in today's market. You just gotta know, you gotta network. Also banks, don't just think of your Chase banks, but think of your local community banks. So how many people here have a local community bank that they're working with? All right, we've got 1, 2. Have you talked to them about any tapes of foreclosures that they may have? They're fresh out, okay. They should be coming up. I think right now foreclosures are pretty low, but I think what's happening with the market is we're going to see a new flux of foreclosures coming back. So you definitely want to continue networking with banks and start that relationship, get your foot in the door. They may not have any now, but each bank is different. And even if you don't bank there, it's a great relationship that you can have. And then it could also potentially be a place for you to get money. Now, we're going to be talking about what the tools you need to do this free marketing campaign. So number one, I guess it's not free because you got to buy notebook, paper, and pens. But number one is you got to get a map, and you can actually get the map for free. I recommend going into the local, let's say you live in the city of Glen Ellen, or let's say you live in the city of Schaumburg. Well, you can go to the village, city village, whatever it's called. You can go to each village, and they have maps there that you can get. Usually they're, you fold them. They're small like this, and you fold them, you fold them, you fold them. You have huge maps, and then you also have Google Maps, of course. But why I like the maps that you get at the village, because they expand, they open up, and you can really get to learn the neighborhoods of each village. Now, what you're going to need for what we're going to be talking about is notebook paper. Now, why do you need that? It's because that's what you're going to be leaving notes at these people's properties. Of course, you're going to need pens because you're going to be taking notes. And depending on the city, village, whatever the ordinances are, the reason why I have on there painter's tape or frog tape is sometimes some villages will not let you put notes in the crack. They actually consider that a fire hazard. So in the door jamb. So certain villages will have certain requirements of where you can put the actual notes. And so that's why in certain areas you may actually need to tape your note on their door, and you can't put it in their mailbox either because you can get in trouble for that. And you can't put rubber bands on the door because also that can be a fire hazard. So each village, you're going to have to look at how can you put your note on the door so that way, because you are going to have upset people that you're leaving notes on their door, and they will complain. So if they're gonna complain, at least if you stay within the rules, you'll be able to continue doing it. You're gonna need a camera. Your cell phone works just fine. The thing with your cell phone, if you're taking a lot of photos though, that's not gonna last very long. So I recommend actually having a little, cheap little handheld camera. You can take photos. This way, your phone, you got plenty of juice on your phone. And then the spreadsheet, that's something that you don't need when you go out with you. And you really need a positive attitude. I would recommend wearing fairly good dress-up clothes, like a button-up shirt, pants if it's the summertime even versus shorts. You don't want to look mischievous in a neighborhood. You want to look dressed well. Again, if you're, if I'm going out in my hoodie, which is comfortable, people may not react to that the same as when I'm dressed in a suit. So people will react to how you're dressed. So I recommend dressing nice. So these are the three ways. You're going to either walk, you're going to bike, or you're going to drive. And if it's in the wintertime, you can cross-country ski, whatever you're going to do. But you're going to go through every neighborhood, and you're going to be looking for these properties. Something I recommend doing also, if you're going to be doing driving, is drive on trash days. Now, why would you think it's important to drive on trash days?
Owners are out tossing garbage.
Okay, so owners are out tossing garbage. Bingo, right there. Everybody's going to have their garbage out except for the people that exactly don't live there. And now you've just hacked a way to figure out which properties are vacant. And if you have a big snowstorm, what's another thing you can do? Shovels. So who's the house where it looks like they haven't shoveled since, the beginning of winter? Yep, absolutely. Piled up newspapers. So these are all little things that you guys can be doing to identify which properties are vacant. Because who do you think is more motivated as a homeowner? A homeowner that's living in the home and enjoying it, or somebody that owns a property and it's sitting there with no one living in it? The second one, exactly. Motivation is king. That's how you're going to find the best potential deals, is when these properties are vacant. And that's where we've had the best deals, is when nobody's actually living in the property. So what are you going to look for if you're not on trash day or you're not on snow day? What things would you be looking for in a house? Exactly what's on. I gave you guys the answers there. Tall grass, overgrown bushes. Again, if it's a summertime and it looks like they're not maintaining the property, there could be a couple things going on. It could be they can't necessarily keep up with the house. Another issue might be maybe they're elderly and they don't have the capacity to be mowing the lawn. But again, if you're elderly and you're not able to keep up with the house, it's probably potentially a good sign that you're looking to potentially sell. So these are all things you should be looking. Of course, any boarded up windows, those are huge, of course. Red flags. Mailboxes, you talked about the piled up newspapers, exactly. Any deferred maintenance. So when you see a tarp on the roof, to me, that is a bullseye. If there's a tarp on the roof, like I pull over and I immediately stop and I take note of that house, because tarps mean that they're not able to maintain their roof. Something happened. Again, these are all signs that there's something going on with the house, because if there's some sort of exterior distress, there's probably some sort of other distress going on with the house that they're not able to keep up with it. Anybody else here have something that they may be looking for that I haven't mentioned that's on this list or that I talked about? I just want to learn too.
Well, I'm a realtor, so one way of looking for absentee owners is to go through the realist database.
Mhm.
find out what the address is and then see where their tax billing address is. So if that tax bill doesn't match up with their home address, right there, you can start mailing it to them.
That's a great point, yes. So as realtors, and we have a lot of realtors in the room, absolutely. You can go on the cookcountypropertyinfo.com if you're not a realtor to get that information. Again, that's cookcountypropertyinfo.com. You can get all the tax information, and if that bill doesn't line up, and so that's especially important when we get into the mailing side of things, because we want to get because if the house is vacant, they may not be going to the house on a regular basis too. So when you look it up on Realist or cookcountypropertyinfo.com, now you know, hey, you left a note here, but how do I get in touch with that owner? So these are just examples of distressed property. Here, the house the house would look fine actually if it didn't have all this overgrowth. Yeah, the toilet in the yard, I guess. Code enforcement, I'll talk a little bit about that. Piled up newspapers, you mentioned. Boarded up windows, overgrowth. Again, this is, in the summer times, you always see this when they've got the driveway, and that's another bullseye to me, is when you got the grass growing through the driveway, and it's especially tall. That means they're not pulling their car in all the time because that growth would be somewhat limited. Versus here, well, they are, but the taller it is, the less that they're using that driveway. What's that right there? Dumpster. So dumpsters, they could be cleaning out the house. Something that you're looking for potentially is any estate sales, yard sales. Sometimes people are cleaning out the house because Aunt Sally can no longer live in the house. She no longer has that option. So when you see a yard sale, and the yard sale isn't just in the driveway, but it's literally across the entire front yard, that is an awesome, awesome, awesome lead. And you definitely want to talk to them, give them your information, because that may be a potential seller. Another example, more distress. So when you're looking and you locate this property, you should take some notes. So number one, you want to write down the address, what's wrong with the property. So for example, I see 123 Main Street. It's got a tarp on the roof. And then I would rate it from like level of distress, meaning like low distress and high distress. Because there may be a property where maybe there's just a little bit of overgrowth, but the rest of the house looks okay. I might rate that as a low level versus someone who has a tarp on the roof, the property is just falling apart. I'm rating that high because if there's a high distress in the property, I'm going to increase my marketing because I want to get in touch with that owner. The more distress on the property, the more motivated that they're probably going to be. And then take a photo. Now, why is taking a photo important? There are a few reasons. Number one, you're going to remember the house. And then number two, when you start sending them mail, you can actually have a picture of their house on the letter. This is a lot more effective than just a regular letter that goes out. Because it shows that obviously you were there. It gets people to kind of stop in their tracks a little bit when they get a letter with their photo of their house on it. So that's something that you can do in one of your touches when you send out that letter. So what to leave? We leave a variety of things. This is the most basic version. I'm a real estate agent, so I have to put on there that I'm a real estate agent. But if you're not an agent, don't put that you're an agent on there. So you would say something like, "Hi, my name is Josh. I was driving through your neighborhood." If you're married, if you have a business partner, like for example my brother, we put my brother and I are looking to buy a house in this neighborhood. We look up school information, so we even put, hey, we were looking to buy a house in your neighborhood with XYZ schools. Now, why is schools important to put on the letter? Because it looks like you're trying to get a very... credibility, and then it looks like you're looking for a very specific house, and then they're more likely to call you because it doesn't look like some sort of mass solicitation. So you can have your notes pre-written out, and then when you're in the area and you look at the different maps, if you're a realtor, you can do a map search and find out what the school districts are with the map search. But if you have the school on there, that's another little piece. And if you don't have it on your initial note, follow that up on your mailing piece that you do to that house where you reference that school. So I'd like to buy your house as is. I'd like to buy your house cash. You don't have to pay any realtor commissions. Please give me a call, your phone number, sincerely. And then P.S., I'd like to talk even if you're not looking to sell. There's always, not that necessarily people are going to call you off of that, but a little P.S., again, you're just trying to create curiosity. And what we do is we don't put so much information on the letter. The more curiosity, the better. And that's my opinion. And then once you start sending the mails, if they're not responding to you, then you start giving them more and more and more information. But curiosity, they have a saying, curiosity killed the cat. People that are curious are more likely potentially to call, or they may be skeptical and not call at all. So you got to play both angles, and that's why when you start doing the mailing piece, then you give them more information. They may need more information before they contact you. But anybody here do bandit signs? You stopped. Okay. I've gotten the best results on bandit signs off the ugliest signs and the handwritten ones where I had the worst handwriting. And I think the reason is because if somebody's motivated enough to call a sign that looks like a 2-year-old wrote on there, they're pretty motivated to sell their house. The prettier the sign, and they call, okay, they might be motivated, but not as motivated as the person that's calling the sign where it just looks really bad. So rinse and repeat. You're going to keep doing this. Make a list of these properties. You have the map. Cross off the streets that you visit because you want to hit a certain neighborhood, certain town. Depends on what your investment criteria is. I recommend starting in either a town you work in, or you live in, or somewhere in between. So let's say, for example, you live in Schaumburg and maybe you work in Elmhurst. Well, you might pass by, you might be passing by a city like, I don't know, do you pass by Addison to get there? Potentially. So it maybe the way you take to get there, you go through Addison. Well, maybe Addison is a particular town. You want to make this where it's not an extra drive for you to do this. Because the harder you make it for yourself, the less likely you're actually going to follow through on this and actually do it. And then again, enter everybody. Initially, you're just going to have a notepad, and you just write down the addresses, and then you reference the photos for those houses. So here's some hacks on versus if you don't want to do necessarily the walking and door knocking yourself. How many people here know their mailman? Okay, great. You want to know your mailman. Why should you know your mailman? Bam, right there. What did you say? Yeah, exactly, which means they're vacant. The mailman knows every house that's vacant, so you can potentially set up a relationship with your mailman almost as a bird dog. And, however you want to pay them, compensate them. Maybe you just are really good to your mailman and, on really cold days, you've got warm cocoa. If it's a hot day, you give them cold water. A beer, maybe not a beer, cold water. But you need to start those relations. Those little things will go a long way with different potential people. But mailmen are great resources. How many people know how to access the violations for the city of Chicago? All right, so we've got a few people. Every property with a city violation is potentially a motivated seller. Now, Chicago, that's a big city. Every other city also has similar lists, but the information may not be as easy as going to a website. There's a Freedom of Information Act that you can go to these cities and get this information for potential properties with code violations, and not every city is potentially going to give them out, but most will with the Freedom of Information Act, or if you have a really good relationship with the people at the city. One thing I do when I'm trying to get permits, or I'm trying to get something done at the city, I show up with donuts. Goes a long way. Things are a lot easier. If you've been having fights with you never want to have fights with the cities that you're working with. You want them to be your best friends. So showing up with coffee, showing up with donuts, these are all things that go a long way for people to like you. And there's old saying, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Well, scratch their back first, give them a little bit something, and then they will more than likely reciprocate and be like, hey, we're trying to essentially make the town nicer. Here's what we're looking to do, and be 100% up front with them on what you're looking to do. Fire departments. Why would fire departments have a list of hoarder houses? Fire hazard, exactly. Houses that are hoarding houses burn really, 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 really hot. And they are very dangerous for the firemen coming in because there's a lot more that's going to be on fire than your typical house that is very well maintained, well swept, with very little stuff in there. So some fire departments, not all fire departments, but some fire departments literally have a list of all the houses where they know that there's hoarders. If they're a hoarder house, do you think they're a good fit for potentially a realtor or investor? Investor. They don't want to post pictures all over the internet of their hoarding house with things up to the ceiling. And we've seen a lot of these houses. And then the biggest hack is you guys don't have to do this yourself. You can pay someone to do the same thing. So any of you's got little brothers, little sisters, nephews, these are all jobs that they can do, interns. These are jobs that you can pay people to do exactly this. You can pay them an hourly rate and then incentivize them for every distressed property that they document, so that way they're doing their job, and then they get paid a little bit more by every property that they document, and then you give them feedback of, hey, this one's not distressed enough, or hey, this is great, but giving them that feedback. Something that I've done is, with people that I've paid to do this, is I make them take a picture of every house that they leave a note at. With the note. Why do I do that? Because it proves that they were there, versus paying, and I don't have to babysit them to make sure that they're putting notes on doors. Now that's if you're doing a blanket and you're hitting every house, but you can also have them do it where they're doing particular houses, and you say, hey, for every distressed house that you bring me, it doesn't have to be an hourly thing, I will pay you, and you leave a note, you take a picture of the note on the door, and you take a picture from the street, and you fill it out this way. I'll pay you $4, I'll pay you $5, whatever you negotiate. This is a way for people to make extra cash. This is not a list that you can buy anywhere. There is less competition in what I'm talking about than going and buying a probate list or buying a pre-foreclosure list. These lists, potentially, they may be in probate, they may be in foreclosure, but many of these homes are not. And would you rather be marketing to someone who's getting 50 to 100 letters, because that's what it's like if they're in probate or foreclosure, or would you rather be the only letter or the only person that's reaching out to them saying you want to buy their house? You want to be potentially the only person reaching out to them. And that's why creating your own list is more powerful than any software, any system of where you're paying money for investing done easy. There is no easy button. You can do everything that I'm saying. You could pay somebody to do it. If you don't want to do it yourself, you can outsource it. But this is the absolute best way to get people that are motivated that no one else is marketing to. And if you're in a realtor, you can also potentially get a listing, or you can also buy it for an investor, or if you're working with investors, like in this room, you potentially have your buyer right there, and you can double in the commission, and then on the back end, you can also get the relist. So if you're a realtor and you're working with investors, you're not investing yourself, I recommend you talk to the investor. If you bring them a deal, there should be an understanding that you get the relist on the back end. And if you're an investor, you should be telling realtors this, because you could even have realtors do exactly what I just said. They just have to give you the list. So you could set up realtors in every town, and you say, if I buy a house that you bring to me with these parameters, and I buy it, I'm going to relist that property with you when I go to sell. Do realtors want more listings or less listings? More. Do they want crappy houses or nice houses to be associated with when they're realtors? Nice houses, because when you relist the house, is the house going to be crappy or is it going to be fully renovated? Fully renovated. So the realtor is now associating themselves with a high-end product that they're going to want their picture and their sign in front of that house because it's the most beautiful house in that neighborhood. So everybody in this room, I want you all to repeat with me these two letters. F-U. Okay? On three. 1, 2, 3. F-U. 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 Follow up. Follow up. Follow up. That's what F-U stands for. Follow up. You send a one and done letter that you're not going to have a very good response rate. You get your best responses. I wish I had the diagram on there, but there's a really cool diagram I've seen on the internet that most of the time sales are made not on the first contact, not on the second contact, not on the third contact, not on the fourth contact, not on the fifth contact, not on the sixth contact, but the seventh, the eighth, the ninth, the 10th, the 11th contact. You want that person to tell you one of two things. Either, I'm ready to sell my house, or would you please stop sending me letters and stop calling me and stop coming to my house. Otherwise, they're going to keep hearing from us. They're going to keep. So, again, one more time. F-U, F-U, F-U. Follow up. Why I say F-U is because I'm trying to get follow up. I'm trying to ingrain it into your head that this is so important. Most wholesalers, most investors will go on the appointment once, they'll give them their offer, and then they'll run away and hide. You'll never get the deal. The investors that are most successful are the investors that continue to follow up with them until that house sells, whether they sell it to somebody else, but many times they will potentially list with you because you've established rapport and they will appreciate your determination and your follow-up with them. So you can send letters to the house after you make that initial note. You need to put them in a rotation. Again, the people with the most distressed properties are going to get more letters. And then try door knocking. How many people here have door knocked? All right, good. You are all awesome people. I love you. Everybody else, leave right now and go door knock 50 houses. Right now. No. Door knocking is extremely effective. Why? Because nobody's doing it. Door knocking is extremely effective. And again, they're either going to do two things. They're either going to say, get out of here. They'll slam the door in your face. Or they might invite you in for tea and tell you their entire life's story. And that's happened many a times where they invite you in and they tell you this has happened, we've had these medical bills. And then again, we're not necessarily always there to just be an investor. We're there to help them in any ways that we can, and we'll come back. And they may potentially know people in similar situations. So anytime you can assist them, whether you can make potentially money on that particular house or not, you should always try to be a resource for people. But door knocking is an extremely effective way to literally get in front of somebody face to face. And then you can try calling them. So Cole Realty Resource, there's lots of other sources out there, but you can actually get the phone number of the house. So you should be following it up with letters, and then the next step, potentially door knock, and if you're too scared to door knock, you should at least be calling. You can be calling, and again, hey, I just sent you a letter in the mail, just calling to see if you had any questions about that letter. You know, I'd love to talk to you. Again, it's Josh Shingles with eXp Realty. Hope to hear from you. And then you just keep doing it until, again, you'll literally build rapport with people without ever talking to them, just by being persistent and leaving them messages. And then when they finally do call you, they're like, Josh, it's so-and-so. And I'm trying to be like, oh, hey, and I have no idea who they are. But it's because I've built rapport through the follow-up. So one more time. F-U. Follow up. It is so important.
Excuse me, before you go, what's a Cole Realty Resource? Would you describe that?
Yeah, Cole Realty Resource, so you can type in any address and you'll get phone numbers for it. So just Google it, Cole Realty Resource. You don't even have to be a real estate agent. You can pay an annual fee and you'll get unlimited phone numbers for addresses.
Thank you.
So this particular house, and why we're not talking about it yet, I'm going to let Juan talk a lot about it, the construction part of it, but for sale by owners, how many people have called for sale by owners? Okay, we've got a lot. Are most for sale by owners realistic in their value? No. Okay, so for sale by owners, you're absolutely right. Most of them think that you can show them the data, but they'll say, yeah, but my house has this tree in the front yard that makes it $100,000 more than the rest of the houses. It's such a nice house. I used to change my kid on this floor, and that diaper stain right there just increases the value of this house. It's because people are emotional about their house. Because of what I just described. They raise their kids in the house. They love their house. Are we looking for people that love their house? No. We want the people that are like, I am sick and tired, bleeping and bleep this house. This house has been nothing but a nightmare since I moved in here. I can't even sleep at night. This thing keeps me up. Or people those are the people you want to talk to, and you'll quickly be able to differentiate people that are talking about how great their house is versus the people that think their house is a piece of crap. Spend your time with the people that think their house is a piece of crap, because they're telling you about how great and perfect their house is and how it's worth all this money. Again, it's not worth your time. It all comes down to what's their motivation to sell. The people that think their house is perfect and it's the ultimate house in the neighborhood, these are not the people that you should be spending your time. You can potentially follow up with them, thank them for their time. Anytime you talk to somebody on the phone, you should also send them a thank you card too when you actually do connect with them. Again, you're building that rapport, something that's not done in this industry. When you meet with a homeowner, what do you do on the follow-up? Do you send them a thank you card? You should. You definitely should be sending them a thank you card because they took the time to show you the house. Whether you get the house or not, again, that goes a long way that other people aren't doing. So here's some different areas to get for sale by owners. But let's talk about this for sale by owner. So Juan, this was a for sale by owner, and the phone number didn't work. They couldn't afford to pay their phone bill. Do you think that's a motivated seller? When you see a for sale by owner and the phone number doesn't work, you better be out there knocking on that door and trying to get in front of that homeowner as quickly as possible. One other thing I think I forgot to mention is talk to the neighbors. If there's a vacant house and it's distressed, the neighbors hate that house. They want that house sold to somebody who's going to fix it up, and so that way a nice family moves into it. They actually would rather not sell it to a family that's going to buy it distressed. They'd rather have somebody that's going to buy it, redevelop it, and make it a beautiful house than they would even somebody buying the house the way it is and then living like Sanford and Sons in the house. They want the house to look immaculate. So when you tell them, hey, I'm looking to buy this house and I'm looking to fix it up, you're that neighbor's best friend. I've had neighbors give me phone numbers that weren't listed on Cole Realty Resource data. They said, don't tell them how I gave you this phone number, but this is how you get contact. This is their address. That address didn't show up on Real List or Cook County Property Info. They will give you data on that neighbor because they want that house sold. They want somebody to buy it. They want them to fix it up so they can get that eyesore out of their neighborhood. So Juan, tell us a little bit about the deal on Leicester.
Okay, so as Josh said, how we actually found this deal, I was driving around looking for deals, looking for FSBOs, and so I called this number, and I could tell this house was like one of the most highly distressed houses that I had seen. So did my thing, just like Josh said. I took down the list, took a picture of it, went home, and called all the numbers from the FSBOs. Well, this number was not working. So I told my wife, I'm like, hey, let's go in the car, let's go somewhere, but I got to go by this house. We got to take a look at it because I think I wrote the number wrong. So we go by there. As we're pulling up to get the number for the house, there's a guy out in the front yard mowing the lawn. And then he's like, yeah, that's my number, but I couldn't pay my bill, so da-da-da-da. So anyways, so I got more information from him. I don't remember all the rest of the details with that, but it ended up, we ended up buying the house. So the taxes had been sold on it, and it was right up where they wouldn't even be able to redeem them. It was like about 6 months away from where whoever bought the taxes would pretty much keep the house from there on out. Owned free and clear, and it was actually the aunt owned the house, and she had been put into a mental institute, and then no one took care of the house. So this house had a reputation for smelling. Like in the summer, you could smell the neighbors like 6 doors down told us it stunk so bad that they could smell it from their house. It was so bad. So what happened is when they put the lady into the mental institute, she was a breeder of birds, of the cockatoodles. She went competitions. She had all these awards and stuff in there, but she bred them in her house. Every single room in the house had at least 10 to 15 cages for birds, okay? So when they pulled her out of there, they took all the birds out, but they left the bird feed in the house. So after the birds already made it smell bad. But now that no one was living there, the mice came in because there was a bunch of bird feed. So the place became this breeding ground for mice that just was terrorizing the neighborhood. And this was in Elk Grove Village. And they have a health department. So the health department came in, condemned the house for health reasons because of the birds and then the mice. And so these people were just in a huge bind. They were going to lose everything and not get anything out of it. So we came just in the nick of time.
Yeah, I think it was even sooner than 6 months. I think it was they were like 2 months away.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Yeah, so I remember the first time I went into the house, driving home, and I'm driving home and I'm like, man, what's that smell? What's that by looking on the bottom of my shoe. There's nothing there. It's soaked into my clothes. It's soaked into my hair. Like, it was just absolutely disgusting. And what's funny, and I wish I would have listened to my brother, first time I've ever been wrong in my life, but
Yeah, first.
first and last, no. So he's like, I think we should clean out the house ourselves. And I was like, I smell like a barnyard driving home. There's no way. He's like, I think they had money. And I'm like, no way they had money. Well, because the birds, believe it or not, being a championship cockatoo breeder, it's kind of like being a horse breeder. Like, there's horses that literally go for like 6 figures a horse. I remember I had a house I sold to a guy who owned a bunch of horses. He bought my house cash. He just sold off like 20 horses, and he bought a $300 and some thousand house cash by selling. Those weren't even his prized horses. Those were like, so same thing is true with these cockatoo birds or whatever they were. She bred them at a super high level, and I think they were free range too. Because you would go in the house and there'd be bird packs like all throughout the house. I don't think she had the cages there, but I don't think they lived in the cages. That's just where they slept.
It was just a suggestion.
So, like, this literally was the most disgusting house we've ever done. But again, I was wrong. I'm like, let's just pay some people, clean the house out. And sure enough, we had Dan hired some guys. I think we hired some guys off of Craigslist. First and last time that we did that. But Dan say, hey, Dan. So Dan was at the house. He was on the other side. Why don't you come up here, Dan, and tell the story? This is
He
lost.
was supervising the guys.
Yeah. So Dan, tell us what happened when you were supervising.
Yeah, I actually, for sure his was free range because I found that eggs in the drywall actually. Like actually they made a nest.
Inside the drywall.
Inside of the drywall. But we hired a couple, I don't know, maybe.
I think it was 3 guys.
Three guys.
Whatever.
They came in to clean that house, but they bring like brand new equipment, all kinds of brooms and wheelbarrows and everything. And soon as they started, you know, they was working in the one room after they moved to the bedroom. And soon as they went to the bedroom, and they was there about half an hour, it was very quiet. And I said, what's going on? Because everybody was talking very silently. And I said, Chico, this Chico. I said, what's going on? And I just came over there. And they was hiding behind the bed, and I can see they grabbing something from and as soon as I start to walk in, they grab some boxes, run over the window, jump to the car, run away. They left everything there.
Money flying out of the bags.
Money was flying from the bag. Like actually, they found some. We don't know how much, but I tried to chase them with my car, but they was driving through the neighborhood pretty fast.
They never came back for their tools.
For the tool. Like actually, we didn't know what actually happened.
There's a lot of, I don't know, they made more money, I think, than we did.
But when I kicked, before they actually like right away ran behind the bed and I saved what we can save, like we saved probably a couple $100 or
More than that.
It was about 1,500.
$1,500 there still.
But that was the money that flew out of the bag, so
That's correct.
it's like what they had, like,
But
There's-
the money stunk. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like, well, we took it to the bank. We found some more money later. And I took it to the bank, and it was not the best looking money. And when they found that, I'm like all happy, you know. I'm like, yeah, we got this money from this house, and you know, I just want to get nice, clean bills. And they're like, oh, what's wrong with these bills? Why do they smell? I'm like, well, it was from a birdhouse. And they're like, we don't want to touch it. And I'm like, well, you got to take it federally. Like, you're a bank, you have to take money, you know. It's, you know, it needs to be whatever. But it was kind of funny.
Yeah, and I think the rule on that is as long as both serial numbers show up, is that the rule on the money?
I think that's what it was, yeah.
So some of the
They-
money
They wouldn't
didn't,
give us ones that it was only half of a bill.
yeah.
But it was pretty old, actually, money, it was like, 1980s or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, after that incident, then we decided, okay, finally, we're gonna clean up the house, so we got our masks, put on our suits, hazmat, you know, all this stuff. And even then, the smell was like passed through everything, it was so bad. But we did, it was kinda interesting because as we cleaned out the house, you could see the phases of the hoarding. Like, the further back you went into the house, the older the stuff got. And you're like, wow, they didn't come back here for at least 20 years or 10 years.
They couldn't because all the stuff blocked the way.
Yeah.
The birds got back there, but no humans.
Yeah. So it was interesting, but we found out what ended up happening is the lady's husband passed away, and that's when the hoarding started. And he was in the army, so I think based on what we saw, he was in Vietnam or something. But anyways. So there's always a story behind why some of these things happen, you know, but anyway, so this was the house. So it had back taxes. It was condemned by the health department. Not all villages or cities have health departments, but that's another place to check if they do have a health department. Had the city violations plus the birds and the smells. So we actually had to work with before the building department would issue us a permit to do work, we had to have the health department come in and allow us to remove that and say, yes, we can do a rehab on the house. So they gave us special permission to go ahead and clean out the house and demo it, all the interior, so that way, without even getting a permit, because of the condition. They were so happy that someone was willing to do that they worked, they bent over backwards with all their policies and stuff to make sure that we could fix up the house.
It was actually, remember when I talked about neighbors being our best friends? In this case, the city was our best friend. I mean, the city was phenomenal to work with, because literally they have been getting calls and complaints on this house probably for the last 10, 15 years would be my best guess.
Even the mayor was like, you know, behind us.
What we gave them two offers. We said, hey, we knew they owned it free and clear. We said, we'll pay off your back taxes, but we want you to finance the rest. So we offered them 110, and then we actually offered them 100 cash. And literally, we had a hard money lender, I'm not gonna name them, that was gonna fund the deal. And at closing, we decided not to use, that's why we actually made more money on this deal, is because we didn't use hard money on it. But they were literally going to charge us for, what was it, an escrow fee? Some
Yeah,
fee.
they were gonna charge an escrow fee for putting the construction money aside, but yet the money wasn't being put aside in an escrow account. They were holding it. And then they were gonna charge us for the construction portion of the loan.
100% of it.
100% of it without any draws being made. So, you know, if you have a hard money lender that does that, we recommend not to do that because your profit potential drops way down. They should only start charging you interest when you make that draw and pull that money out for the construction, so.
Yeah, and I'll make a note too, if you guys are looking for hard money, talk to me after this. The source that we help people get now, there are no junk fees on it, and then you only pay on the money that's drawn. So, especially here, if you're doing, let's say you're doing a $200,000 purchase with a $300,000 rehab in the city of Chicago, well, you're not using all $300,000 from day one. A lot of lenders will charge you 100% on the rehab money from day one. With us, you don't have that. You only pay as the money is dispersed. And if you've done 5 deals, we can even do 100% of the purchase and the rehab. That's separate from the story, but talk to me afterwards if you're interested about that. So yeah, we had people tell us we were crazy on this house. I actually did a webinar and I still don't know who this investor was, but I did a webinar, a national webinar, and somebody was on the webinar and was like, yeah, I actually looked at that house, and I was scared to death of it. And, you know, they missed out. I think a lot of people were intimidated by this house. Yes, it needed everything, but in a way it was good. So this was before we had our general contractor's license. And one of the reasons why we have our general contractor's license now, so Juan, I'll tell you a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about, you know, what we did with the house to, you know, interview general contractors and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we were really ramping up our flipping business at this time. So what we wanted to do was find some good GCs, and we're like, if we can find a GC that's willing to come into this house and do the work, we got a good GC, you know. So we were screening. Dan helped a lot with that, but we screened probably, and I don't know, 20 to 30 GCs through that. And the funny thing is some would walk right in and walk right out, and there were even a couple that didn't even walk in. They said, we're not interested. So, you know, at that point, you know, okay, these aren't GCs that necessarily would work with homeowners or investors, you know. So sometimes if you have a really bad property and you have a good scope of plan, scope of work, sorry, then that would be a good way to screen GCs as well. You want them to, you know, be able to, are willing to do things that maybe aren't normal, you know.
And I'll give you this little tidbit, in not just in rehabbing, but in life. Always work with somebody that says, would you rather work with somebody that says this is hard, or somebody that says that this is easy? This is easy. Somebody that comes in and says, this is, oh man, what am I gonna do here? That person is gonna, you do not want to work with that person. Same thing is true if you have a car and it has a problem and you take it to the one mechanic and the mechanic is like, oh man, this is gonna, take it to another mechanic and they're gonna say it's easy peasy. Oh, anything in life, go to the people, again, it may be a little bit more challenging or whatever, but anybody that starts that initial conversation about how hard something's going to be is somebody that you don't want to work with.
Yeah, because it's going to get harder and harder as the job goes along. Kind of to tie in with the whole mechanic thing, I used to be a car mechanic. I worked on Land Rovers. And it's funny because if you know anything about the Land Rovers, they're very, very complex vehicles. Very complex.
I was going to say a piece of junk,
But yeah, they are. They're nice rides, though. Don't get me wrong. But it's funny because a house is not nearly as complicated as a car is, as far as like what it has running through it and everything else, and the tolerances on the engines and all that stuff. So I used to take these Range Rovers apart, the engine. I pull out the engine, take it apart. You'd have over 250 parts like laid out in your bay. So whenever I hear a contractor or a subcontractor that I hire now, oh man, you don't understand how hard it is to do this trim piece, I'm like, until you take an engine apart like I did and put it back together, where literally you're spending 40 hours on an engine just to take it apart and put it back together, don't tell me something's hard. It's, just get it done, you know. So anyways, side note. So when you have those people that are always like, oh, this is hard, just like Josh said, it's always going to get harder and harder. Everything's going to get harder. So walk away from them as fast as you can.
So that's me there. I have a mask on, still stunk in that mask. This is a bathroom.
So
That's the office, I think.
that was the office. That might have been the only room that didn't have a cage. But you can see one right there.
A lot of the bird cages were actually, I think they removed
They had
like
removed
40 or something
a bunch
like
of
that.
them already, but we took a whole bunch more out.
How many dumpsters?
I want to say we went through, man, I don't even remember.
Yeah, it'd be like
It was
five.
like 5, 4, and we did the 40,
Big
the
ones.
40 yarders, which you can't really get now. So they were the big ones.
You had a question? Yeah, I mean, you can't salvage it all stunk, but the money we salvaged, but
Yeah.
everything else, I mean, it was just disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
So that, here you can see some of the pecks in the drywall from the birds. There. I don't know if I have that picture of the lawnmower in the.
How long ago was this?
This was a few years ago. I'm trying to think here. There used to be a lawnmower that, remember he was talking about the guy that was mowing the lawn? He stored his lawnmower in here. Once he removed the lawnmower, and the house smelled worse, because at least that gave the grass clippings smell. You know, it's kind of like hay. Like if you have barns, why they use hay is because it absorbs the smell. So actually removing the lawnmower, it smelled worse.
So that's the house clean there.
Clean.
Okay, we haven't demoed anything yet, that was just after we cleaned the house out.
This looks like windshield wiper fluid. Did you use that in your car, Dan?
Yeah, I think so. Because later when we cleaned the house, my actually car was smelled so bad, my wife was refused to drive it. Like we actually after 1 year we sold my car, because it was like in the Seinfeld, you remember?
He sprayed it with Febreze anytime anyone came to look at the car. So, yeah, so then we went ahead and demoed everything. I mean, we took it down to the studs. This was our first gut rehab that we did. And we really didn't have a choice.
So here what we did, and we did a few coats, we actually did everything with Kills. And I think we used an oil-based paint too, but we sprayed multiple times until the health department, I believe, signed off on it.
Yeah. And we did treat it with some stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Framing,
everything.
and then we treated it before we sprayed too, so there were multiple steps.
Even when it was demoed like this, before we sprayed it, and this is in winter, so it's cold, and you know, smells in the cold are not as strong as like in the heat. You walked in there, and even with it demoed, you could still, it still smelled really strong. So that's why we had to spray
Till the
multiple
smell's
coats of that stuff.
So you had to do that because mold or because?
No.
So what an oil-based paint does is it encapsulates. So you can, again, we treated it with like a bleach treatment, and then we had like, I don't want to say chemical, but there was like some sort of, yeah, like a chemical treatment. And then anything that's left, if you use an oil-based paint, it'll encapsulate it underneath the paint. So that way odors don't come out. That's why Kills is very popular. So like they sell Kills everywhere. But Kills is like your go-to, and they sell different kinds of Kills. You want to use the oil-based paint, that's going to be your strongest paint.
Wood absorbs odor. That's why you did it.
What absorbs odor?
Wood in general.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And then here you can see, I'll let Juan continue talking about the rehab.
Yeah, so one of the other things too is this house had, so you walked in, there was a family room and a dining room to the right, and then there was a big partition wall, and then on the other side was a family room and then the kitchen. So what we did is we took out that wall between all that and created a great room and moved, so the laundry room was also off the garage, so by us opening that up, we were able to expand the laundry room to actually make it functional, because it was also a laundry room, water heater, I think that's it. So it gave it more room, and also allowed us to build this pretty massive kitchen with this nice big island that you'll see. But yeah, so we drywalled it, we put in some skylights, all new windows, all new siding, we redid the roof, and then here we don't use this anymore, we actually have some left over, but acacia wood, which is normally runs like $8 a square foot just for the material.
But yeah, I don't even think we have do we have our membership, or where do we get that from?
We got it through Direct Buy. I probably shouldn't be saying how much we pay for it, but
Yeah,
it
we
was
got a
like-
really good, like, yeah, we
it
got
was
it
less than
half.
$4.
Yeah.
Anywhere
less-
else, it was $8 a square foot.
Yeah. I love those floors.
We did a vent-free fireplace because there was no chimney there, so to create that nice great room feature, we did a vent-free fireplace. There's a kitchen.
And we've got cabinet samples there too, if you guys are looking for any cabinets. There's the kitchen almost done. Some more pictures of the kitchen. And then here's some before and afters. Bathroom.
Question
think we sprayed,
The attic we sprayed, the crawl space, the smells went up, like it smelled like a normal crawl space, which was, it was kind of what,
it did smell down there though, when you did go down there. I remember.
well, yeah, but once we did everything
It
and.
smelled a lot less, because
Yeah.
it's concrete, it's not as, I mean, concrete is porous, but not as porous as wood.
Yeah.
Replace the subfloor?
What's that?
Did you replace the
I
subfloor?
don't think we did.
No, we just sprayed everything. Yeah, we put 2 to 3 coats on everything, yep. We did put, actually, we did put another layer of subfloor over the existing subfloor, because,
Oh, there's a lawnmower.
yes.
So we bought it for 100, rehab was right around 85. Holding costs were less, because we didn't have a hard money loan on it, and then we sold it for 315 without an agent. So we actually sold that, if we would have sold it with an agent, we would have made, potentially a lot less. Again, we have a rule with our agents, even though I'm an agent, if an agent brings me a deal, I'm gonna give them the relist too. Doesn't matter, even though I'm an agent, I'm happy to pay a real estate agent. But this house was literally, went from the worst house in the neighborhood to the nicest house in the neighborhood. So literally, we had somebody that was just walking by the house every day, and then they gave us an offer, and they said, "We know what you're gonna make on this house." We said, "We don't care." They
Yeah,
gave
I
us
mean, they gave us a low ball offer.
lowball offer initially, and then the third time, and we got it at, it's true.
Yeah, I
true
mean,
value.
that was our target, sales price, and we got our target sales price without an agent, and we just held to it, and sometimes you'll run into that as well, I'm doing a house that used to be my house, and then I turned it into rental, now I fix it up and sell it, and I had one of the neighbors come in, and they're like, "Oh, how much you gonna sell this for?" I told them, they're like, "You're not gonna get that for this, blah, 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 blah," and telling me this, and I'm like, she wants to buy it. Well, why are you telling me, whatever, I'm selling it for this amount, so that's the one thing too, so, don't, even if you have a potential person that comes by that will try to buy the house from you ahead of time, and, some of the tactics that we use, like, when we deal with a FSBO, you're like, yeah, you're gonna save money, cause, there's not gonna be an agent involved, and whatever, those things that we do to try to bring the price down. Sometimes people will do that to you as well as an investor. So, just stick to your guns. If you wanna get 315 for it, or 400, or whatever, stick to it. Because sometimes if you have the best product, you could actually, by selling it to them at a discounted rate, you might actually be leaving money on the table, because if you would have listed it, you would have made more money. And, I mean, we had another situation where we actually had an agent, that when we finished the house, I mean, I designed the house, I did all the stuff, and I took a little pride in it, but I knew it was a slam dunk house. I knew it, just for the neighborhood. And the agent was telling me to list it $50,000 less than what I wanted to list it for. And he was so adamant about it that he didn't bring us the deal. I approached him to submit the offer for us. That he refused to list the house for the price that I wanted to list it, that we wanted to list it for.
And then we get more.
And then we got more than what we actually listed it. We got over asking by 15,000. So.
And again, we're not saying this to be negative against
Right.
like real estate agents or anything.
But know your market.
Know your numbers, know your market. Sometimes though, you will say, depending on the market, like if you have an offer before it's listed, potentially that could be a good, but if it's in a softer area, but if it's in a hot market, yeah, stick to your guns. If it's a soft market and you get an offer right away, then you may want to consider taking it, because once you go on the MLS, but that's just knowing what's the average days on market for that neighborhood. This was in an area where the neighborhood was hot. It was a hot neighborhood. Most of the housing stock there was pretty original. There was not really fully done houses like this.
We did do some of it, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have to redo, like,
It already had even though it was an older house, it was like one of the first houses that were built
Like,
with
I think we did the
copper.
panel maybe, but
Yeah,
like,
we
we
had to
didn't,
upgrade the electrical panel, but most of the electrical, I mean, that house
So
was
we
like
saved a lot
ahead
of
of
money
its
there,
time when
yeah.
it was built, because it was built in the sixties, but it was, for a
So-
sixties house, it was way ahead of its time.
yeah, it was like a gut cosmetic rehab, which is kind of weird to say, but yeah, so we saved a lot of money there too. Versus like Chicago, you're gonna be redoing all the electric, you're gonna be redoing all the plumbing, you're gonna have to redo your water service coming into the house. And we didn't have to do any of that. With this, there wasn't a basement. You know, a lot of times you spend money, in the basements, you know, if you're finishing a basement. So, yeah, it's a ranch house. There's not much to it. So who wins when this is all said and done? Well, number one, the family that sold us the property. I mean, they were literally, about to lose the house to back taxes. I mean, somebody would have gotten that house to back taxes. Other investors, again, walked away from this deal. You know, it's pretty crazy, that people did, but they were just scared. Like, if a house is like falling into the earth, that's a little bit different. You might as well just knock it down and start over. This was something, even though it smelled so bad, I mean, it was technically a cosmetic, but people couldn't look through that. This was actually the perfect house for us as investors. I mean, there couldn't be a better house than this because it had the distress and the people were just done with it. They wanted to pull the money out. They were able to pay the back taxes. They put quite a bit of money in their pocket where they would have lost everything. You know, our investors, our contractors won, of course, the neighbors, Elk Grove Village, the housing market won, the buyers, our company, and then especially the guys that ran off with they really won. I think they're in Jamaica on the beach somewhere.
Yeah. So one other thing too, like another way this deal could have gone is where we just cleaned it out, gutted it out, sprayed everything, and then sold it to an investor. And we probably could have made a pretty good penny doing that too, with a lot less work. You know, so that's another approach, and we've done that in the past too, where we pick up a hoarder house, and other investors cannot see beyond the piles of trash in the house. So all you do is you just pay, you know, a couple guys $1,500 for the day. Well, you probably need like 6 guys. Come in and clean the house out, get the dumpsters. So your investment, you buy the house, you close on it, your investment's like $5,000 to clean out the house. Now you can market it to investors, and you can make a pretty good money because so many people are afraid to make an offer on a house like that because I don't know what it is. It's just, all it is garbage. It's not, you know, it's not that big of a deal. So if you see something like that, don't let it scare you off. It's just a few dumpsters and some labor, and don't call 1-800-GOT-JUNK or whatever. They're expensive. So
Yeah, and then you know, I call that strategy prehabbing. So prehabbing, and then put it on the MLS. If you're going to go through all that work, put it on the MLS. You're going to open yourself up to more buyers, and then somebody's going to overpay for it.
And provide the best.
And provide.
Good.
Yeah, I used to do that on, funny story, I'm going to tell you another story about short sales. I don't know if anybody here has had experience with short sales. If you've ever done anything with mold, one thing I used to do, even if the mold wasn't bad, I would be waiting for the BPO agent, which the BPO agents give their opinion of value. So I'd have on like a hazmat suit, full face mask. It wasn't even bad mold, but like, you're going to want to put this on before you go in. It's all perception, right? Perception is reality. And so for a BPO, you want that BPO to come in as little as possible. Like that amazing deal we got, I think one of our best short sales is that one in Bolingbrook. And there was not that much wrong with it. There was like a water leak in the master, but it had a little bit of mold. And we put that and used that, you know, with negotiating with the bank.
How long did it take you to complete that project?
That was like 7 months, 8 months,
yeah, from,
close to close.
I think so, yeah. It was actually, yeah, not a bad deal for how much work we did.
So
going back real quick to the hoarding situation, dealing with finding the right folks to go ahead and help with the situation. What do you guys do now differently compared to the Craigslist folks that you looked for before? Do you go in and like kind of scope out everything, kind of dig around a little bit first, and then bring a crew in, or do you just do it yourself now?
So, I mean, that was like before we had guys. I mean, we have our own construction company now, so we've got guys that we can trust a little bit more. I mean, you know, everybody's honest until they're given an opportunity not to be, especially in construction. It's the one job where you can literally get out of jail yesterday and have a job today. I mean, that a lot of contractors, unfortunately, that's why a lot of contractors have bad raps, because a lot of them are literally, they can't have a normal job because they have a bad history behind them. I'm not saying all contractors, but you know, it's just like any other business. So yeah, you definitely need to scope it out. And if you think, like, again, my first mistake and last mistake, I would have listened to Juan in that, you know, potentially that would have been a whole different. I mean, that could have. We're only speculating, but they probably, at a minimum, it was probably something like $20,000 at a minimum.
Yeah, but we don't
don't
worry
know.
about it like
Yeah.
anymore. I mean, that was kind of when we were going, and you kind of got these high ideas of, you know. So now it's just like if there's something there, there's something there, and they're gonna take it, you know, at the end of the day. So our focus is doing the rehabbing or doing the whatever. So if it happens, because if I'm there, if we're doing everything, single hoarder house, and we're the ones emptying it out, and you know, if there's money there, then yeah, maybe we hit the jackpot. But if there's not, now we wasted a bunch of time when we could be looking for other deals or doing something else that we know will bring us income, because you want to be doing income producing activities. And you know, cleaning out a hoarder house is not an income producing activity, you know, because you could pay someone literally $10 an hour, you know, to $15 an hour to do that, because it's not, I mean, it's lower than, it's like the lowest type of labor you can have. I mean, you know, so you have to look at it that way as well, you know. So would we have done anything differently?
Well, we would have done a
we
little bit.
probably
differently.
would have,
Yeah,
yeah.
because we would have done the construction, we would have hired the subs, and
Yeah,
we would have done it a lot quicker too, but.
yeah. Yeah, because we had issues with the contractor where, you know, he was supposed to put all these coats on, and then I was at a conference with Fortune Builders in California, and Dan calls me up. He's like, hey, they're like putting up insulation, and they haven't sprayed any of the 2x4s or anything. So, you know, we had to stop it, and Dan goes there, and the contractor starts getting all pissed off, and it's like, dude, this is what you agreed to do. Spray the house. We need the, you know, that kind
Yeah, I
of
think
thing.
on the contract, we had 3 coats written on there.
Yeah, so sometimes, I mean, that's where, you know, and then again, they're stepping out of the bounds because we still had the issue with the city at that time. So he's just trying to, you know, he figured, oh, I'm out of town for a week. I can try to bypass, you know, but, yeah.
I'm a little confused as to you're not using the Craigslist crews to do that anymore, and I know how you do it and all that, but what if someone cuts their hand and gets a nasty infection?
Insurance.
Yeah.
What insurance is?
Well, that's why the thing we do differently now is we do have subs that do our demo and cleanup, and we require them to provide us a certificate of insurance, naming us as additionally insured. So, you know, that's when
Well,
that
we're
was,
not paying each individual, we're paying the company that's doing the cleanout for us, who has the insurance.
yeah. So we sub it all. We're a sub-based construction company. We don't do any of the work ourselves. We sub everything out. So, yeah, and so we have our own insurance, and then all our subs are required to have insurance, and they need to provide it. And then make sure, and if you do that, make sure that you give them your email, because if they cancel their insurance,
You get notified.
you'll get notified immediately, versus if they just mail it to you, you may get it a month later, and now
Job's done.
the job's done, there wasn't any insurance, so.
Yeah, because a lot of contractors will get the insurance for the permit, because the city might require it, show it to the city, And then, that's why a lot of cities now require, and villages require them to be named on the insurance policy as well, because they get notified if the sub, cancels.
Any other questions?
One thing that kind of was around our roundtable today was regarding how you go ahead and get a contractor signed up and how much money you give them and how you handle that.
You mean
so that
upfront?
they'll Run. What's that?
You mean up front?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
there's-
so if you hire me, I require 50% upfront. But if you hire other people, I recommend not to pay them upfront. The reason I do that now, and I'm mostly actually working with homeowners now. I do work with investors if it makes sense, because if I did just stuff for investors, I wouldn't make money, because there's just too many people trying to take money out of the pot. So I always recommend investors to become their own GCs. But typically, I will not pay anyone up front, you know, so, and if you find a good subcontractor, most of them will not charge up front, you know, so, especially plumbers, electricians. With framers, you normally have to provide the materials anyways, so you're not gonna pay them for labor that hasn't been done, you know. So that's the approach, we take.
Yeah, so for example, let's say the contractor says, well, I need money for the materials. Well, then you can get invoiced from wherever that place is, paid out on their behalf or however you have your agreement, but then that comes out of the total payment to them. But yeah, they don't need money to start demo, you know.
So just, you know, yeah,
So- some
don't pay if you don't have to.
Some contractors literally, you know, you may have to work it out where you're paying them like weekly, because that's how they pay their guys. But put it where they have to reach a certain milestone for them to get paid. So if, you know, I gotta pay my guys on Friday, well, if you gotta pay your guys on Friday, you better have this, and this done. And then they're on their guys to make sure that it gets done.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the best ways to get loyalty, is pay them more often, you know, so.
So don't pay up front, but just pay them.
Yeah, and if
quickly.
you can pay them weekly, you're gonna be heads and shoulders above anyone else. And they're, you know, so they'll come to your jobs. Cause I have, my plumber that I normally use for Chicago. He does work for a lot of different investors, but I can call the guy up and he'll show up for me anywhere, because I'm one of the few investors that pays him right away, you know? And so I earn that loyalty. I don't do as many deals as the bigger investors or GCs that he works with, but because I pay him right away when the job is done, he will go. He comes out to the suburbs and does work for me out in the suburbs. He won't do it for anyone else. He's a city guy. That's what he does. But because of the relationship and paying him always on time and paying him, you know, right away, yeah, because he was telling me, yeah, this one guy, man, you know, he owes me for 4 houses. He'll get paid eventually, but he's like, I've already had to pay my guys. I
And
had
he
to pay
may
for them."
not, you know, it's
Yeah.
always in his mind, am I gonna get paid for
Potentially,
these
yeah.
jobs? So, you know, and what I've done in some cases, if a contractor does an outstanding job for me, and they told me, okay, it's gonna be this amount, sometimes I'll pay a bonus, unsolicited, be like, hey, you did a really great job on this, here's a little extra. Why would I do that? Because I'm trying to get loyalty. So, exactly like Juan said, when there's a job that I have for them, we're going to take priority. Because one thing that kills you in real estate more than anything else is holding time, and you know, especially if you have a hard money loan, that interest rate adds up, and if you're in a high tax area, that adds up quick. So awesome. Well, any other questions?
Did I hear you say you went to a fortune builders conference?
Yeah.
Is that where you guys learned the business, or?
Partially. Yeah.
Part of it, yeah. Yeah, we
We've
were
been doing
doing it before we got in there, and actually, I think this deal was done.
Right at the beginning of when we joined.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I figured it was somewhere in there, yeah.
How hard to get the general, contractor's license?
How long?
How difficult is it?
Oh, easy.
It's not that difficult, it's money. Yeah, you gotta pay for your
Insurance is what's the expensive part.
Yeah, so the liability, so you have your two different types, so you have your liability insurance, then you probably want your builder's risk insurance, and then you want your, workman's comp insurance. But the big problem is, then if you have workman's comp, all your subs have to have workman's comp. Because as a general contractor, you get audited, with most insurance companies, you get audited every year. And so, you have to show how much you paid your contractors, your subcontractors, and then you also have to show that they provided a certificate of insurance showing you as additionally insured. If you don't, they'll fine you. And they'll, so if you paid them $100,000, they may say, you need to give us 5% of $100,000 to cover any because even though no claim was made or anything, there is still, there was the risk that was involved for the insurance. Now, if you go talking workman's comp, they'll fine you like 50%. So if you paid this guy $100,000 and they didn't have workman's comp, but you had it, they're gonna charge you $50,000. Where are you gonna come up with that? So even if it means.
So there is liability with
Yeah.
getting your GC license. I mean, unless you're doing at least 5 deals a year, I wouldn't recommend it because it's not gonna outweigh it. But if you're doing more than that, then, I would potentially look at getting your GC license. Otherwise, it will cost you actually more money, more headaches, more paperwork.
But if you're applying for a permit, all the villages, let's say you own that house under your company, do they allow you to do the work yourself, or you have to hire?
Well, you have to list like a plumber, an electrician, so each of the concrete, masonry.
Yeah, and you depends, like the city of Chicago only requires a liability insurance, or builder's risk, one of the two. Other places will require that and then a bond, like Skokie requires a bond, Wheaton requires a bond, and that's an additional amount, and usually that's only, depending on the size of the bond, it may be like $50 or $150. Yeah, so I mean, it might be, if you don't wanna go to work, if you're the only person in your business, you don't necessarily need workman's comp, you can waive that. So then, you won't get audited for that and that kind of thing. But if someone does get injured, and then they're not able to work, you may get into trouble because they as a sub may not have it, and so they may try to sue you because, but they're subs, so, because you didn't have it, you'll be fine, but if you have employees, you won't be, so you just be, and I'm not an expert here, so always talk to insurance people, but this is my understanding of how it works, but you should always have, when you're yourself, you can waive that, so, yeah.
There's a lot of municipalities, if you're the owner, if it's your primary residence, you can be your own GC. You don't have to.
Correct.
Yeah,
But you still need the licensed subs, but if you were like doing a flip, you wouldn't have to hire.
but as a investor, and if you list a company, they're not gonna allow you to do it.
Yeah.
You will, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out.